right. So we talked about outreach events, and hopefully one of the results of these outreach events and these 1,000 points is that eventually what will happen? New people may accidentally tumble into your sanctuary on a Sunday morning, right? And that's where we eventually want people to be part of our faith community, brothers and sisters of Christ who have the love of Jesus in their hearts and who have accepted the Lord Jesus Christ as their personal Savior, right? And that's our goal, all of us. The mission of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Christ for the transformation of the world, right? And so I just wanted to share with you what hospitality is and how we can train our laity to just be maybe a little more hospitable. My husband and I recently moved from Columbia, Kentucky, where I was teaching at Lindsey Wilson College. I still teach there online, but I no longer teach in residence, to Boston, Massachusetts, where it is a cool 70 degrees today. I'd much rather be here, just for the record. I love hot weather. I'm a weirdo. I'd rather be hot than cold. You will not be jealous of me this winter. Let me just put it that way, okay? And I didn't get an appointment. I was too late in the appointment season, so I got last man out, last man standing in appointment season. So guess what we have to do when we move to Boston, Massachusetts? We have to do what? Find a church. Raise your hand if you don't remember the last time if pastors, you've never had to church shop probably, okay? How many of you laity remember shopping for a church? How many of you rather have a root canal than shop again for a church? It's horrible, horrible. My husband and I started church shopping in New England. And this is how many churches and Boston's a pretty solidly populated city, isn't it? We are currently driving 50 minutes to go to church. Oh. How many of you that seems like we're a good catch? We tithe and everything, okay? we're a good catch. It's not like we're weirdo church people, right? We bring our Bibles. We know how to behave in church. It's not like, well, sometimes like people come in and it's obvious they're unchurched. We need to work with these people in their faith to grow. But like we're a good catch. Okay, we're already churched. We come to you pre-packaged. All you have to do is boil us. Instant. We're instant active church members. I know a thing or two about churches. My husband knows a thing or two about churches. We have some things we can contribute. How many of you would be happy to have my husband and I in your congregation as a resource to you? Well, the people of Massachusetts don't feel the same. And this is how we know. We went to our local United Methodist Church in Massachusetts, and we came in. There's a greeter at the door, and she said, hello, and we said, hello, and that was all she said to us. We walked in, there were no signs, didn't know how to get from the parking lot. We entered the closest door. She was standing there, so we're like, well, there must be church this morning, right? We said, can you tell us how to get to the sanctuary? She was, you can go through that hall, up the stairs, take a right, take a left, and through the double doors. Or you can go up these stairs and go down the hall and take a right and a left and go through those double doors. How many of you thought that was helpful to us? Or not. So like after getting lost, 10 minutes later, we arrive in the sanctuary, we sit down. Sermon was fine. Music, some of the best music I've ever heard in the United Methodist Church. Very gifted musicians. I want to be fair, okay? The church service lasted an hour and a half. Okay? How long should your church services last? Unless you live in a kind of context where that's not the expectation. Most church services are how long? An hour. Hour and a half. We're sitting there for how long?
Hour and a half.
No one offers us a bulletin, nor is one made available to us. Okay? The woman who said hello to us didn't offer us a bulletin. When we entered the sanctuary, no one gave us a bulletin. As we sat there for an hour and a half without a bulletin, no one offered us their bulletin. The service ended, and we got up and left, and no one had said hello to us.
Wow.
No one. Then guess what happened the next week?
You didn't go.
I didn't go back there. You can bet that, right? Went to another United Methodist church, because I'm a United Methodist. I tease people. I'm like, my parents, I'm adopted. After they picked me up from the airport, the first place they took me was to where? To church. To United Methodist Church. I was practically born in a United Methodist church. And went to another church, went into that church, sat in that church. Guess what happened there?
Same thing.
No one offered us a bulletin. No one said hello to us.
5 churches? Wow.
It wasn't even extended at the pool.
5 churches.
It wasn't extended up
Wonder
there.
why we lose.
5 churches we went to. No one said hello to us. No one gave us bulletins. No one acknowledged us.
These are all United Methodists.
All United Methodist churches.
And they all think they're friendly.
They're all friendly. It is I just want you to get, and this is not just a Massachusetts problem. My daughter recently moved to Illinois last year. She went into the big United Methodist church, kind of the equivalent of this United Methodist church. No one said hello to her. She called me up in tears and says, Mom, because she knows I'm a United Methodist minister, right? Every United Methodist mama wants their baby worshiping at a United Methodist church. And in tears, she said, Mom, please don't ever make me go back to that church. My heart just broke into a million pieces. A million pieces. Finally, a friend of Eric's that he works with, a attorney in his software firm, invited him to church, and people said hello to us. That's why we drive almost an hour to go to church on Sunday morning. The pastors didn't even say hello to us.
Wow.
And pastors, when you say hello to a first-time guest, I'm just telling you it doesn't count.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Should start at the door.
These are all friendly churches. If I talked to each one of them and asked if you're friendly, they'd say, yes, I'm friendly. But hospitality is different than friendliness. You're friendly to your who? Friends. Hospitality are strangers. Hospitality is the art of how do we interact and treat strangers. People we don't know. People that could be good and bad people. So what are some bad examples of hospitality? Where in society do we see bad hospitality? Where? On the road? Yeah, not friendly on the highways. Where else do we see it? Fast food restaurants. McDonald's, you don't even get to talk to a person anymore at McDonald's. You got to punch it in the screen. Anybody go to the new McDonald's that you just punch the order on the screen?
Yes.
I refuse to use them. And Panera. You don't even talk to a person anymore.
All the restaurants.
Grocery store have chicken.
Grocery stores, you don't talk to a cashier anymore, do you? And heaven forbid you get something that's weird. And then you've got to flag someone down. So Walmart is increasingly, they used to be good at hospitality, but they've now even eliminated the greeters, haven't they? Walmart's new marketing plan revealed that they're going to get rid of the greeters. Again, we stay on these trends. We know what's going on out there. Okay? One of the worst examples of hospitality is the DMV. Government agencies. How many of you would rather, get the flu than have to renew your driver's license?
I work at the DMV. Very nice.
You may be nice, but your processes aren't nice. Your processes.
Which location you go to, but if you go to go to downtown branch, I will be there. And I'll
How many people of you have literally waited hours only to find out that you don't have the proper documentation?
Or you in the wrong line.
You're in the wrong line.
You're pretty awesome in Boyd County, I should say.
My husband and I waited 2 hours at the DMV in Massachusetts to transfer our plates, only to be told we did not have the right documentation and we would have to come back again. Do you think we were unhappy when we left there? Yes, we were. You guessed correctly.
Well, in Louisville, if you
And then once,
574-5700, ask for Brittany and I'll talk to you.
that's right. Brittany, I'm not trying to give you a black eye. Seriously, you know me better than that, right? We all agree Brittany is wonderful. And even in the worst organizations, there are bright and shining lights like Brittany, right? All right. Because Brittany, she's just trying to collect a paycheck, right, Brittany?
I'll get there, look.
You just work there. You just work there. But how?
So you didn't investigate what you had to take before?
We did. We thought we had everything in order, but it happened that our insurance, our credit union had changed its name. And the insurance had one thing on the insurance documentation, and the credit union actually existed underneath a different name. And so we had to go back and get documentation of the change of name in the credit union.
And they could have done that online.
Nope. I was not dealing with Brittany, just for the record. Brittany would have done it for me. I just want to, how many of you have dealt with maybe a government agency or something like that where you just thought that was just really more complicated and harder than it had to be? It was painful. I mean, we don't all get fortunate enough to get Brittany when we go to DMV, right? So, but they can be very painful experiences. Raise your hand if you know. Not hospitable, right? Okay, unhospitable. What about best practices of hospitality? Starbucks, yeah. Starbucks has a book, the founder of Starbucks, it's called The Third Place. Starbucks is called The Third Place. It's you have home, you have your workplace, and Starbucks is your third place. Chick-fil-A, how many of you love your little Chick-fil-A? My only problem with Chick-fil-A is I only crave it on what days? Sundays. Am I the only one who I want me a Chick-fil-A sandwich on Sunday after church? And you're like, oh yeah, that's okay. And then you're like, you forget on Monday that you want a Chick-fil-A sandwich on Sunday.
One on Saturday night.
There you go.
That's a good idea. I have to remember that. Thank you. Good tip. But they're better fresh, I'm just saying. Who else has great hospitality? Do you love going there? Yes. Disney World. If I could just live in Cinderella's castle, I would totally just live in Cinderella's castle. I have been to Disney properties all over the world. I have been to them in Shanghai, I've been to them in Paris, I've been to them in Japan, I've been to them in Orlando, and Disney has hospitality down to a science. Now, they're running into an issue right now, Disney is. They've driven their scale too far and they haven't scaled their hospitality to meet the influx of crowds. So I'm reading a lot, and I'm a studier of culture about what Disney is doing to scale their hospitality, because their hospitality is suffering because they've become so large. Okay, so the larger you grow, hospitality will become increasingly more difficult because you lose kind of quality control. Does that make sense? All right, so what does Disney do that makes us feel so good that we want to spend? I mean, how many of you have been to Disney, at some point in time, money loses all meaning at Disney World, right? Yeah, money begins to lose all meaning, okay? Don't ever go to Disney World with a credit card. That's my advice for you. Pay cash for everything at Disney, but money stops to lose meaning because you're just having such a good time. It doesn't mean anything, right? What does Disney do that makes us feel so good that as soon as we leave, we want to go back there again? What do they do? How do they make you happy?
Welcome you.
They welcome you? How do they welcome you?
Welcome to Disney.
They just say, welcome to Disney, come on in. How many of you can say, welcome to such and such in church? Come on in. How many of you think your people can do that? Yeah. What else does Disney do?
They are delighted to see you.
Yeah. There's a genuineness at Disney.
Disney for several years.
Yeah.
And they're just, I mean, that's ingrained in everyone. We're delighted you're here, and how may I help you? You see people
Oh,
taking...
say that again. How may I what?
How may I help you?
So they're there to what?
To serve.
They're there to serve.
Yeah. You see a family...
Might
taking a
churches be
picture.
there to serve?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Look at this church. We shouldn't have a hard time with this, should we? You're there for who?
For them.
For them.
You see a family taking a picture, you
And
offer
say,
to take the
oh,
picture
can I do it so
that
you can
person
be in your
be
picture? Yeah. So you think of the customer
Them.
or the
Yeah.
first.
Others.
Say that again. You.
Anticipate.
How many of you have been to Disney and they do something for you before you even ask for it? And you're like, I was just thinking that. How awesome are you? Right? You get your little birthday bunny button, and before you know it, a free little cupcake shows up at your table because it's your birthday. Wow, they knew what I needed before I ever even asked for it. Okay, anticipating needs. We're going to talk a little about that. What else does Disney do? Yes.
Well, this is not Disney, but I had a neat experience
Yes.
at a Kroger's in Brandenburg.
All right.
I was standing in line to check out, and this lady came over, said, come with me and I'll check you out. She went to the self-checkout. She took all my groceries out, checked them out. She said, may I help you? Do you need some help out
Ah,
to load the groceries in the car?
yes.
I was just totally amazed.
Should we be amazed when things like that happen at churches? Are we?
Yes.
All right, let me tell you why your lay people are struggling with greeting first-time guests. We grew up with this. What's that say? Strangers are what? Good or bad? How many of you teach your children and grandchildren this? Don't talk to strangers. If a stranger offers you candy, what? Go the other way. So what do? We give people mugs filled with candy. Just saying. I mean, we don't have a puppy in the car, but just saying. Okay? We are taught from a young age that strangers, people we don't know, are not good people. That we have to be cautious, at best, that we need to be cautious of them, right? And so when people we don't know come into our loving faith community, these messages that we learned for safety's sake as children go off in our heads. Is this person safe? Is this a good person? Is this person gonna disrupt the community, right? I mean, it's human nature. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just human nature. We want to protect our faith communities, right? Yes? Is anybody else a little protective of their faith communities besides me? We don't want someone coming in and harming them or exploiting them or being negative around them, right? We don't want that. But then how do we balance that with being hospitable, entertaining strangers? All right, so this is what I'm going to say to you. Your people may be the friendliest people on earth, but we are not naturally hospitable people. We have to teach our churches how to be hospitable. How do I know this? Because hospitality is a major in college. If you could get a degree in it, chances are we can teach our people in the pews about it. Okay? The hospitality industry is $1 billion industry, right? There is stuff for churches to learn from them. So we have to teach people how to be hospitable because they have bad hospitality habits. I'm going to get down and dirty with you. Are you ready? Is there anyone in this room who has never, ever picked their nose? So we all admit we're booger pickers. mothers would tell you, don't pick your nose. How many would tell your mom, don't pick your nose? And I remember just being little and being super confused and being like, there's something up there and it needs to come out. Why can't I get it out? Right? I'm getting uncomfortable, right? Am I in the right house, right? My mom didn't mean don't ever pick your nose. My mom meant don't pick your nose where? In public. Okay? So our people have just habits that they get into. It's just that the timing is not always the best. Do we want our congregations to have someone else in the church that they're just dying to talk to and can't wait to connect with? Do we want our people to have strong relationships with each other? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. We just don't want them to make that a priority during the meet and greet time on Sunday morning. It's an inappropriate time to do that. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Miss Jane isn't bad because she goes and talks to all her friends during the meet and greet time. Miss Jane needs trained that there's a better time to talk to your friends than the meet and greet time. Okay? This is what I'm saying. So one of the very, very worst habits people have is at that meet and greet time, we all talk to our who? Friends. Our friends. Okay? All right, let's talk about our bulletin greeters. Who wants to be my bulletin greeter? Hey, volunteer, bulletin greeter? I am going to make you look bad, but come on up here, sweetie. I need 2 people. Okay, so you're my bulletin greeter. And you're going to be here handing out bulletins. Yeah, come on up here. Come on up, girls. So Brittany here's my bulletin greeter, and she's got the bulletins in her hand. And Aretha here is your best friend. Now, what do you like to talk about? Shoes? Do you like shoes?
I love shoes. I love shoes.
Hi. So, you walk into church and you see Brittany's shoes, and she has amazing shoes on, and you two are best friends. They're new. What are you going to do, Brittany?
Oh, what?
What are you two going to do?
So she's
you
complimenting
just
me?
got your new shoes, and you're feeling fine in your new shoes. So you're...
Girl, look at this. Where'd you get them? I got them $5.
First time guest. That was a first time guest that just walked between them.
Yes. She walked
Right in between us.
Yes.
Did anybody notice? I mean, those are some fine shoes, Brittany. All right, you can go sit down. You can have a seat. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. How many of you have ushers and greeters who forget that their job is not to catch up on the UK game? Yeah? Do you know what I'm saying to you? Bad hospitality habits. Their main objective should be to identify and welcome guests. We need to retrain and remind our people about why they're there and what their jobs are. Okay? I mean, let's face it, if you're a first-time guest, you're not going to interrupt that conversation, are you? Not for all the tea in China. Right? Because they're obviously into something, and I'm new here, and I'm not about to insert myself into all that, because, I mean, I like your shoes too. Right? But you're not going to stop them from their conversation and ask for a bulletin, are you? I can tell you, all over the United States, in all denominations, okay, this is happening. How many of you can see this happening in your church and maybe have actually witnessed it? Okay? Are they bad people?
No.
No, they're not bad people.
Well, the sensation of the plot.
But do they need refocused and retrained? Yes, they need refocused and retrained. So, number one rule in your church, greet people you don't know first. After that, you can go talk to the pine trees out back if you want, okay? And we're going to talk about how you greet people that you don't know, because I think people are definitely afraid that they're going to say hello and make a fool out of themselves, right? Because how many of you have ever been like, are you visiting with us for the first time? And they're like, I have been here for 10 years. Okay. All right. So, if you're pretty sure they're a first-time guest, you can do that. But if you're not, sometimes we're like, oh, sorry, you've been sitting behind me for 10 years. Well, so maybe that's a good thing, right? But the rule of thumb in every church I serve, and if I see this going by the wayside, I will take worship time to remind them that you're to be great. I don't want to see you talking to anybody you already know, okay? This is great even in large churches, because you're so large, guess what? Get out and meet someone new, right? In our large churches. So this works for large and small churches. And it makes sure, it ensures that someone says hello to people. So let's talk about how to greet a guest. Developed this when I was working with John at in, out, up. Can you remember that? In, out, up. So you talk about yourself first. What do you think you're going to say about yourself? Hello?
I'm Jeff.
I'm Jeff. How many of you know your name? Depends on the day over here. Depends on the day over here. And then when you introduce yourself, you might say something, I love my church here, and one of my favorite things about this church is that, John preaches great sermons, and we just love listening to Pastor John's sermons. So you should have maybe one thing that you like about the church. Why are we doing that? Why do we do that?
You're going to be encouraged.
Yeah. If you're only here to, take a nice hour nap or whatever, but you're just sharing a little about what you love about the church. It personalizes it a little.
Well, it invites a person, too, to look and see what they might like.
Yes, you're inviting them into conversation about what they love or might possibly be looking for in a church home, right? Hello, my name is Kim, and we just really love Pastor John. We just love him. He's a great guy. You're going to love him too. And then we say something like, have we met before? Okay? Or, what's what? Your name. Okay? How many of you like to be called by your name? I put myself through high school and college waiting on, I was a car hop. Anyway, I was a car hop, and so I ran out the little trays, had them roll down their windows and put the thing on their tray. Sold fish sandwiches basically for a living at a little local restaurant as a car hop. And I can't tell you, we wore name tags, but I got called honey and sweetie and babe more times than I care to think about. And I just felt so special when someone would call me by my name. Okay? Because we tend to depersonalize people, don't we? And categorize people, right? And so people want to be called by their what? Name. Okay? This also helps when we go to follow up with them. If you get a full name from someone, the internet is a miraculous thing, okay? You now have a means to follow up with them after church, okay? So if you get a full name from someone, you need to give that to your pastor or whoever does follow up for your churches. So you ask your name, have we met before? Up. About God, okay? In, out, up. Hi, who are you? This is what I love. This is how we worship God here. Does that make sense? In, out, this is what I love about this church. Up, pointing to God, what God has done in your faith community. Okay? Does that make sense? All right, here are some tips about some things that you can talk about with new people, because I'm going to be talking about sitting with first-time guests. And when you sit with a first-time guest, the most important thing you do anytime you greet anyone is what? Smile. A genuine smile. People know when they're not wanted. My dog knows when he's not wanted. What makes you think your first-time guests don't know the difference? Okay? People know where they're wanted and where they're not welcome. Am I wrong? Okay. So smile. Act like you're actually happy they're there. You might be a little scared, you might be a little nervous, but you can smile through that, can't you? All right, here are things that you talk about. You can ask how long they've lived in the area. What is that going to tell us if they answer that one? Whether they're what? New. Well, we just moved here. What a wonderful conversation starter, okay? How did you hear about our church? Yes? You might be finding out that that stupid Facebook page that you didn't want to have is actually paying off, okay? Do you have friends or family in the area? No matter how they answer this, you're going to learn something about them, right? Right? Either they've lived here all their life, they have lots of friends and family, that's their uncle sitting over there, right? Whatever. Or I'm new, I don't know anybody. How many of you think that's going to help you follow up with people? Okay. I like your shoes. I like your shirt. Compliment them. Make sure it's genuine, please. Don't make stuff up. But that's just showing I see you. I see you. Okay? I see the choices you're making, even if it's just shoes, and I like it. I like you. I like the choices you made. Okay? Ask about family and pets. Pets are the new kids. Pets are the new grandbabies. How's your summer been? How's your week been? How's your weekend been? Right? Do you have any hobbies you enjoy? Or just say, tell me about yourself. Okay? And most of all, and this is, I love, introduce them to other people around you. Okay? Particularly to other people that you think that after talking to them for a while they might have a connection with. Does that make sense? So it's important. Statistics show that if after a year of going to a church, if they don't recognize, not even know the name, but recognize 25 faces, and when I say recognize, enough to like give a nod at the grocery store, you know what I mean? If they don't recognize 25 faces in a church, they will not be back. Okay? So you want to introduce them to as many people as you possibly can. My daughter is a recent graduate of Lindsey Wilson College, and at the time we lived in Ohio. And I have to tell you, when I, make sure I'm in the right, oh, I am in the wrong, okay, there's those, I'm sorry. Introduce them to the pastor. Sometimes that's good if they're handy. We don't have access to the pastors. All right. So she decided she was going to go to Lindsey Wilson College, which was 6 to 8 hours away, depending on traffic from where we lived in Ohio. How many mamas know you do not send your baby off 6 to 8 hours away to go to college? Right? Like no mama. That's no mama's dream when they hold their baby in their arms for the first time. I hope you go so far away from me, they'll take me all day to get to you one day. No. So I was a good mom. I'm like, oh, that's a wonderful choice for you. You're going to love it down there. And the first day of college, I was going to take her down to college. I was going to buy her all the stuff she needed for her dorm, but I was not leaving her there. I thought, we will get down there. She will see how far it is, how many people she doesn't know. She will see that Columbia, Kentucky is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the McDonald's doesn't even stay open late there, okay? And she'll be like, let's bounce. I was not, there's no way I was leaving my baby in Columbia, Kentucky. Have you been to Columbia? Raise your hand if you've been to Columbia, Kentucky. Yeah, would you leave your baby there? No. I wasn't doing it. So we went out, bought all the stuff at Walmart, put it in the car, did the thing, drove down there. We went down the night before, because like I said, 6 to 8 hour drive. So we went down the night before, got a hotel room, got up the next day, put on my brave mama face, and I went to drop her off at this horrible Lindsey Wilson College. And, which you know I'm a professor at now, so we know, ha-ha on you, right? So we get there and we're greeted with this.
My grandson went there.
And there's like all kinds of Blue Raider with their class year on, welcome to Lindsey Wilson College. I'm like, well, that's nice. Still not leaving you here. We pull in to unload the car, and we open the trunk, and as soon as we open the trunk, the entire football team shows up the back of my car, and they remove every last thing out of the trunk of my car, carry it up 3 flights of stairs, and take it to her dorm room. I didn't even haul a pillow up there. Okay.
I wish they were there when I went to Lindsey Wilson for licensing school. And my dorm room that we stayed in was on.
Were you in Phillips?
Where were that? Where was that?
Phillips is the old white building by the library. The president was there. President of the university was there, unloading stuff and carrying it up. The head of finance was there. The professors were there, unloading cars and hauling them up. I left my baby there because I knew I was leaving her in the right place. That is the power of hospitality. Do you know what they did? They did one thing. They went out of their way. They did something they didn't have to do. They weren't obligated to do it. Her tuition didn't cover, labor on move-in day. President Lucky doesn't have to be there. The campus pastor doesn't have to be there. They aren't getting paid to do that. Okay? They're expected to do that, but are they getting paid to do that? No. They went out of their way. And it made me think, if something happened, she is at a place that will go out of their way to make sure things are okay. How many of you think you want a church that's going to go out of their way when things in your life go south? Yeah. So go out of your way. Go above and beyond for your first-time guest. When someone asks you, how do you get to the sanctuary? You say, let me show you. And you go and you walk with the person. You don't say, go down the hall, take a left, right, up the stairs, and turn around, do the hokey pokey, and go through the double doors. Which is what we do. How many of you ever gotten directions and been like, whoa, I remember go down the hall. And then you find Brahman at the end of the hall and you're like, how do you get to the sanctuary? Here's some ideas about how we can go out of our way. Offer to sit with first-time guests. No one goes to church to sit alone. Some people might. Your introverts might be like, no, I'm good, but someone should offer to sit with them. Okay? How many of you are more likely to go back to a church if someone sits with you and you made a new friend? Yes. Makes all the difference in the world. Take them instead of direct them. If they have children, they want to know where the nursery is, take them to the nursery. Introduce them to others. Give them information about your church. Okay? They shouldn't have to ask for information about your church. They should be given information about your church. All right? First-time visitor parking. It's kind of old one, oldie but a goodie. Okay? Particularly if you have a small parking lot and parking is at a premium. All right? Some churches have second-time visitor parking. Be nice to their kids. How many of you know kids can be kind of bratty in church sometimes? You give my kid one evil eye, I'm not coming back to your church. How many of you agree with me? You're mean to my kids, you might as well have stabbed me in the heart. Be nice to their kids. For those of you who have a more formalized children's ministry, think about how you follow up with those kids. How does that youth pastor or the hired youth children's pastor follow up with children? Do we have a gift for the children, not just a gift for mom and dad? Does that make sense? Learn their names. Offer to have lunch with them. The churches I serve, and I don't know, I've never served gigantic churches, but not so many people that the church can't afford the McDonald's. I tell my people, take them out for lunch, turn in the receipt. My lay people, okay? Take them out, offer to go to lunch with them, follow up if you can, and be hospitable, but not what? Sorry, I missed that. Be hospitable, but not what? Desperate. Okay? They will run around if you are desperate. All right, so I want to talk about some things, and interestingly, we were talking about signage. The interior signage here is pretty good. Pretty good. I actually, one of the things that they fly me all over the United States to do, strangely enough, is advise churches about signage. Is that a weird thing to be an expert in? Because I think it's slightly weird that that's kind of my claim to fame. So they have weird, a lot of these United Methodist churches are in chunks. You know what I mean? And the layout of the building isn't natural. I want to talk to you about signage, and I'm going to focus on interior signage. But interior signage should be large, should be attractive, it should be consistent in appearance, it should be clear, and do not crowd your signs. I will haunt you from my grave if you crowd your signs. Okay? And we're really fortunate that we have some good examples of signage here in this building. How many of you walked in and you knew where to go? What did you see? A sign. If I can't get to your sanctuary and I'm scared already, I may just go back to my car and go home. That's the reality of it. People are going to get back in their car and go home because it's too hard. You don't want to make going to church hard. All right, I'm going to just blow through here some PowerPoints on signage. There is on-wall signage. It's just signage you mount on the walls. I like these snap frames you see, I guess it's on the right-hand side. And the frames open up, okay, the plastic comes out of them, and you can replace that signage behind them. So if you re-logo, if you repurpose your rooms, does that make sense? You can change out that signage, and it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg. So it's called snap frame signage, and you can buy it pretty easily on Google or not Google, on Amazon and stuff like that. So I really like snap frame signage that is flexible, where you're buying the frames, but you can rebrand and remarket and repurpose rooms as often as you like. How many of you that makes sense to you? It's an economical choice, yeah. There's ceiling hanging signage. If you have really high roofs, or no walls to hang signs on. How many of you have windows or something on the walls? There's just not really a good place to hang signs. If that's the case in your sanctuary, you can use some overhead signage. And then I really love, this is one of my favorite things of signage is Pastor here, I would recommend here, the only thing I'd recommend here in addition to signage is they get some of this, what I call freestanding signage, which are like trade banner signage, okay? And what's really lovely about this trade banner signage is that, like, if you have a wedding or a funeral or something like that and you want to take that down, you can do that. Okay, and I really like these freestanding signs. If you are in a faith community that does not own your facility, so you're worshiping in a school or in something like this is your ticket to signage, okay? Because you're setting up and tearing down every day, day in and day out. So if you are in one of those situations, you're gonna go strictly on sandwich boards and banner trade signs that go up and down every day. And then there's electronic signage. Just wanted to give you, but this is how you figure out if the signage in your church is any good. You conduct an audit. So you're going to go through your church and you're going to place giant Post-it notes. So you have these giant Posties now. Have you seen these at Staples or Staples, as we like to call it? At Staples, okay? And you go through your place and you put Post-it notes where you think you need signage. Does this make sense what I'm saying? So if you know signage is a problem in your church, you make pretend little signs on these giant Post-it notes. Sanctuary, the arrow that you would use, you know, the directional arrow. You're going to put your directional arrow. Children's wing, this way. Bathrooms, this way. Are you going to list every single room out on your sign? No. You're going to list key places people look for consistently in your church. No one cares where the janitor's closet is, okay? No one's looking for that. Maybe if you make a mess or something, but you know what I mean. You're only going to list key places where people are going to be looking. The next thing you do is you recruit people who've never been in your church before. How many of you have friends or family members or coworkers who have never been in your church before? Anybody? And what you do is you take them to your church and you say, I want you to stand here and I want you to tell me, I want you to find the way to the sanctuary. Then they get to the sanctuary. Where might someone from the sanctuary need to go? From the sanctuary to the what? Now I want you to think and I want you to say, can you find your way to the bathroom? You might go from the sanctuary to, can you find the children's area? From the entrance to the children's area. And you're going to, without help, let these people look at your mock signage and tell you if they were able to find where they were looking for, okay? And if they weren't, where they got lost. Because you need a what there? You need a sign there. How many of you, this is easy? You can do this. Never thought to do it, did you? Okay. But this is how you find out if your signage is good or not. Okay? So after you, and you may have to do this 2 or 3 times before you get your signage really down pat. Another thing I recommend you do is at the bottom of that Post-it note, put down the size sign that you wanted to put in there, okay? So that person will be able to say, I don't know that I could see a 2x3 sign or whatever, or 11.5 by 11, 8.5 by 11 sign. So a lot of you have good signage, it's just way too small, okay? A sign isn't any good unless you can read it, right? You finalize your signage, you place your order with their conference or a printing company, and we recommend that when churches do signage that they consider their visual identity, your logo, the fonts that you use consistently. If you're not using consistent fonts, John will have to bring Eric in, and that's a whole nother marketing and branding is Eric Seiberling's happy place. But your signage is important. Very briefly, if you want to do an exterior signage audit, and I didn't put exterior audits in here, but if you want to do an exterior audit, what you do is you have strangers or members of your committee, you yourself, use whatever GPS system you currently use. If you use Google Maps, if you use Waze, if you use your car GPS, go from your home or the mall or wherever you think lots of people live, okay? Type in your church address and follow those directions. As you go by your church, ask yourself, do I see my church? Do I see signage for my church? Do I know how to get to my church from the signage? And then when I get to my church, do I know how to get from my parking lot into the building? Is this making sense? You also want to go by your church kind of at a good clip. Okay? Again, signage is often too what? Small. But we don't realize it because we know it. We know the sign's there. But if you're, it has to pass the 30-30 test. Does anybody know what the 30-30 test? 30 feet away, 30 miles an hour. You have to be able to read it at the 30-30. Does that make sense? Okay. So exterior signage is very costly. That's why we don't cover it. We're trying to offer you accessible and affordable solutions for your churches. Outside signage is very expensive and not really financially accessible for a lot of churches, so we don't really cover it. Yes?
What does that say about all the cute messages that people like to put on their little signs?
That they can't read because the font is too small or unreadable?
Well, I mean, are they worth even putting up there in many cases?
I think what we like to use for exterior signage is church name and logo. That's all we usually recommend that churches put on exterior signage. Just because what other information does the person need? Okay, some churches like to put service times on there. That's fine if your service times are consistent and they're going to stay consistent. That's fine. As a little under, if someone's really interested, they'll slow down to get the information for a service time. But honestly, we encourage churches to stick with logo and name. I don't know if does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Because unless you have a really good place where people are stopped. One of the churches I served was at a 4-way stop. The electronic sign, we could get a little cutesy and futsy there because people are stopped there. They are going to read that sign, or a stoplight, right? So if you're fortunate enough to be at a stoplight, you can get a little cutesy with your signage, a little more detail oriented. But most churches don't have that. They have to pass the 30-30 rule. Okay? All right, how many people are feeling good right now? I'm going to change your mood. Get rid of your clutter.
My grandma gave that to the church. You can't move it.
Don't care. Do care. We can have a little conversation. I have some time. I'm looking at my notes here. I have some time to give you. And we can talk about ways that we can deal with grandma's pictures and the 9,000 plaques in your church, okay? Or am I the only one who's pastored that church? Did anybody else pastor that church too? Look, many of us have pastored that church. How am I going to say this nice? Your churches are not graveyards for pianos that do not work anymore, or sofas that are 20 years old and nasty and you wouldn't ask your dog to lay on, that do not belong in your youth room. Because you've pastored that church too, right? Oh, awesome. Lucky you. You should write that down because you do not want to be pastor there wherever you're serving. Okay? That's not what the church is for. Pastors, we need to learn when people say, would you like a 20-year-old TV, to say, no thank you, we really don't have a need for that right now. We accept the stuff because we feel guilty. I can tell you right now, Goodwill does not feel guilty when they pull out your shorts that are stained and you gave to them and they know they can't really sell them and they throw them away. They don't feel guilty about it. Why does the church feel guilty about it? We are not a place for stuff you don't want to pay to have hauled away.
Right. Say that.
Okay? How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? One thing you can do to limit this, or to get rid of this conflict about stuff that's old and have outlived their usefulness or their fashionability or their usefulness in the church. I have, in the churches that I serve, a donor form. And anytime a donor donates something to the church, they're asked to sign the form. And the form states that they understand that if this item would become broken, unusable, or no longer useful to the church, that it will be given, sold, or thrown away. How many of you this is making sense to you? Preemptive strike. I mean, the reality of it is a lot of people, they're just trying to be generous, aren't they? I had a church for some whatever reason. People thought that's where their Christmas trees came to die. I went in there, there were 8 Christmas trees in the sacristy. 8 dead Christmas. I mean, these were horrible. I mean, they made Charlie Brown's tree look good.
What are they, live Christmas trees?
Thank heavens, no. They were all artificial. And one day I took my altar guild ladies back there and I said, is there a reason we have, and these were 8 in addition to what we normally used at Christmas time, okay? Is there a reason we have, I kid you not, 14 Christmas trees back here? And he said, we don't use like 8 or 10 of these. And I said, why do we still have them? I don't know. There's just, people just bring them in. And I said, can we get rid of them? And they said, well, I guess so. And I said, it's like this. Let's make room for the things we really need to do ministry. Okay? There are some things that we have stored that have not seen the light of day since we have put them in the storage closet. How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? Vases. How many churches got a vase issue? How many vases does your church need? I mean, we're the Olympic champion of vases at some of these churches. I get a church flowers, stuff like that. You need some. But every bride, funeral dinner, fill in the blank, has left their vases behind for us. Guess what we can do with those things? You can toss them or ship them off to Goodwill. Like I said, if you don't want to throw it away, Goodwill will. It's okay. Like if you have people who get really like stuck on the throwaway thing, you say to them, maybe we can take this and donate it so someone else can enjoy it. Is that an easier way for people to deal with the decluttering of a church? So I'm working with a church right now, and since you asked, I'm working with a church right now in West Ohio, and this is a historical church. I kid you not, they have Tiffany windows in their sanctuary. That's beautiful, beautiful stained glass. And I'm going to give this side of the room a little love. And they have been clearing out their rummage. Now, how many of you know the older your church, the harder it is to do this, right? And one of the families who was very generous to this church have 5 angel pictures hanging in the hall. These are the creepiest angels I have ever laid my eyes on. There are children in this church who will not walk down the hall. Will not walk down the hall. Mine, little 3-year-olds who are like, I'm not walking down the creepy angel hall. Okay? Because of these pictures. And this committee, this woman has given the unenviable task of clearing clutter, updating her church. And so we were on a coaching call last night, and she goes, this is a thing. There's a cousin of the family who donated all this money who still goes to this church. And people feel like it's disrespectful to the family and to the cousin to take these pictures down. But I talked to the cousin, and the cousin doesn't care what we do with the pictures. So that's good, right? So here's what you do. The pictures go back to the cousin. Fair enough? They belong to his what? His family. If he wants to throw them away, let him throw them away. On the same weekend you take those pictures down in church, you have a special appreciation Sunday for this family. You present the nephew with a plaque of gratitude for all his family has done for this church. In deep gratitude for the generosity of this family. So we have gone from 5 angel pictures to what? 1 plaque that will hang in the corner of the memorial room. If you don't have a memorial room, you need to get a memorial room, because that's where those plaques go. Does that make sense what I'm saying to you? Again, it's a bad habit. There's a more appropriate place for that stuff. It's not where everybody walks all the time, right? It's where those of us who have those memories, who have those attachments, can go and take a great walk down memory lane, right? All right. Is that helpful to you with the clutter thing for the gentleman who asked about what do you do with Aunt Bessie's, broken table that has only 3 legs and the chairs all wobble and having said that, I find that a lot of things can be repurposed and used for great purpose. Old furniture is very trendy right now. If you repaint it in chalk paint, beat it up a little, so we can repurpose some old things. That country chic kind of look. Don't throw something away if you can really truly use it again. I think it keeps a certain segment of your church happy that you've repurposed it. Does that make sense what I'm saying? They see you're not just like a bull in a china shop getting rid of everything. And let's face it, that's solid wood furniture. That's going to last. They don't make it like that anymore. So things can be repurposed. They just need to be updated before they're appropriate for our churches. Does that make sense? So do the updates. Change the upholstery on the chairs if you don't want to buy new chairs, okay? But you shouldn't feel like you're walking into your grandmother's house when you go to church, okay? We love Grandma, but none of us want to live in her house, right? Because chartreuse green they say it's coming back, but I don't know about that. All right. Clutter, you need to get rid of the clutter. I'm afraid I might end a little early, but we'll have time for questions. You need to learn how to see your church through your guests' eyes. The churches I work at, I send secret worshipers to. How many of you know what a guest person is at a restaurant who does secret reviews and then they go in, they don't know they're there to review the food, and then they publish some horrible or a wonderful article about that restaurant? We don't do it publicly, but we hire and send guest worshipers to churches to let me know, are my people talking to other people during the greeting hour? Are people opening the doors? Are people doing what they need to do in the nursery? Are people, do I need work on my preaching? Sometimes pastors, we need to work on things. Do I need to work on my preaching? Is the music up to snuff? Okay? These people, you want to encourage them to be honest. You're paying them for their feedback. The going rate right now is $75 to $100 for a secret worshiper. I have a form they need to fill out. And what I use is people who are churched already and fit in the demographic that church is trying to reach. So if your church is trying to reach young families, I find a family who's worshiping 2 counties over, okay? And then I send them to your church, and they fill out this form about your grounds, your building, clutter, hospitality, your worship service, your follow-up, okay? They fill out this form that I have that kind of does a 360 of their visit with you. And then I lovingly sit down and share some of the results with you. I'm sorry?
Why only churched people?
Because unchurched people, how do I say this, don't talk the same lingo that churched people do. Okay, so when they're reviewing a church, I want them to be able to say, there's way too much liturgy in here. The contemporary music wasn't really contemporary. It was, of a different era. So I want people who know what good church already looks like. I don't want someone who's a stranger to the church and is going to misinterpret something a church is doing. Okay, does that make sense? So I look for church people who are already found a great church home, they're happy there, and they know what they should be replicating and what they should sing and what best practices already look like. Okay? Yes? Did you have a question?
Yeah, when I was going to be the associate at a church, large church, and the senior pastor and I talked about a month before I went, and he said, I want your family to start coming next week.
Did anybody say hello to you?
And that's what we did. We had a checklist. And 5 weeks she was there with my kids, and no one in the church spoke to them. And so,
not surprised, but
the first Sunday morning that we were there, in each of the 3 services, because she was at each of the 3 services, took a lot for my kids to sit through 3 services, but he brought us up front, we brought
Right,
them
right.
up front. And he said, how many of y'all have met these people before? And nobody raised their hand. And he said, you should have. They've been here for 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And it was
It's a wake-up call.
yeah. Because of that, we went through a whole process of changing.
Absolutely.
How we treated people, parking lot greeters, we did the whole thing.
These secret worshiper feedbacks, if your congregation can be open to the feedback, can be game changers. But guess what churches say when I say, these people were sitting here for 5 weeks and no one said hello to them? They say, but we're a friendly church. Okay? So if you let the feedback be your friend, it can totally change the future of your church. But you have to let the feedback be your friend. Because it can be very hurtful, can it? I mean, pastors, face it, if someone criticizes our sermon, that ain't going to go well for the person on the other end of that criticism all the time, is it, right? We're not always open to feedback because we're very vulnerable, right? I use the analogy, it's like telling somebody their baby's ugly. Yes?
How do you suggest we go about getting the feedback?
From a secret worshiper?
Or just any feedback in general? Church members or however?
You can, yes, just ask for it. Just ask for it. Do it in a formal way, do some surveys or something like that, but you have to ask for it.
Suggestion box in the surveys?
I wouldn't do a suggestion box. I would say if there's an area that you suspect is troubled, that you do surveys in your church that don't have names on them. And you tell them, we're soliciting feedback about, say, you're curious about the quality of your children and youth programs, feedback from our children and youth programs, and we'd like some feedback from you, some anonymous feedback from you. And then you just ask like 4 really easy open-ended questions. Are you satisfied with our children and youth programs? If I gave you a magic wand that did a mid-sized miracle for our children and youth programs, what would that mid-sized miracle be? What is the strength of our children and youth programs, and what's the weakness of our children and youth programs?
Having a town hall discussion in your church.
You can have a town hall discussion. Those are fine. I actually encourage you to keep those smaller because those can go south. So I recommend what's called a cottage meeting where people would sign up and go to those. I took John through a cottage meeting process at Columbia where it's just smaller and a little more intimate, and people who might not talk are open to talking. Does that make sense? Okay. We move a lot. How many of you got that impression? We move a lot. This is our 14th move, our move to Boston. Yeah. Military and United Methodist pastor. We're going to move a lot. So I want you to show you something that changed my life. How many of you like, this lady's really gone off the deep end. She's jumped the shark. How did a Pop-Tart change her life? So we had moved to Virginia, the Virginia Beach area, and I was not yet a United Methodist pastor. My husband was in the military. We were stationed at which Air Force Base? Langley Air Force Base in Virginia Beach. And we were looking for a church home. We had gone to 3 or 4 churches, and guess what happened to us? Nobody said hello. And actually had some negative experiences. We had a pastor tell us, because we were in temporary housing. How many of you know in the military you don't get your housing right away? You live in temporary housing sometimes for up to 3 months. So we were in temporary housing, waiting for a permanent housing to be assigned from the Air Force. And we were told by a pastor, because we explained, he asked if we left our address, and we explained that it's a temporary address. We don't, we're waiting for a permanent housing. And he says, why don't you just come back when you get a permanent place to live? Didn't go back to that church. We were about to quit going to church. We were just so exhausted from visiting church after church after church and feeling unwelcome and like our child wasn't welcome, and our daughter was like 3 years old at the time. How many of you know there's nothing worse than taking a toddler to church? Okay? It's a nightmare. And we wanted to teach her how to be in church, so we didn't ship her off to the nursery, and she wasn't always an angel, you know, and we were going to stop going to church altogether. I love the Lord, but I don't love the Lord as much that I'm going to go to church and be treated like I'm not even a human being. I'm not doing it. I'll be religious. I'll be spiritual, but not religious. And so we decided to try this in one more church. This is the last church. I'm not going to another church. I'm just not doing it. I'm going to quit going to church. And of course, a 3-year-old running late to church. Anybody with kids running later than we should? It's our first time visiting this new church. And so I do what every good mom does. I put a Pop-Tart in her hand and said, "Here, eat this in the car." We arrived at the church. We run in. Thank Jesus, and I mean this in the most sincere way, the back pew was open. So we slide into the back pew. How many of you knew, do not ever sit your guests at the front row? They will never come back to your church. And back pew, those are where the best seats in the church are, the back pew, okay? So, slip in the back pew. And what I didn't realize is that Lindsay had brought her Pop-Tart in with her from the car. She proceeds on her way into the back pew to drop the Pop-Tart on the floor and smash it into the carpet. How many of you, that is a church no-no? I grew up in the church. I was church. I knew you don't bring food in the sanctuary. You're not supposed to bring food in the sanctuary. And there I was with a smushed Pop-Tart in this church. So I'm like, I gotta clean this Pop-Tart up. So I'm in the pew with not my best side, facing out toward the aisle, if you know what I mean, frantically cleaning up this Pop-Tart. Now, how many of you know Pop-Tarts are sticky and messy when they get smushed into a carpet? So I'm doing my best, getting my wet wipes out of my purse, cleaning up this carpet. I'm just like, I'm mortified that this has happened. Well, at the corner of my eye, I spy. It was one of those long churches with the long aisles. You know, it wasn't a nice in the round. They had this long aisle. I spot about half a mile away, it felt like, an usher coming down the aisle. I'm like, I'm about to get kicked out of church for real. And I begin to tear up because I know I'm not supposed to have this Pop-Tart. And I didn't mean to bring in the Pop-Tart, it happened. And here comes the enforcer. And so I hurry, try and get myself in a presentable position and sit down in the pew. And I'm still on my way up, if you know. So I'm kind of like this as the usher arrives at the end of my pew. And he looks at me and he smiles. And he says, "Ma'am, can I take that for you, please?" And I put these crumbled pieces of Pop-Tarts in he hands me a bulletin and he says, "We're glad you're here.
Awesome.
Welcome to Chestnut United Methodist Church."
Yes.
One person changed my life. You can be that person. Your lay people can be that person. How many of you think we went back to that church?
Does he know he changed your life?
He does. He's gone now, by the way. He's with Jesus now. Do you want to be that one person? Does your church want to be that one church? Do you have people in your your church who wants to be that one person? Because I think we do have people in our pews who they really do want to be that person. But we have to train them, right? If you remember nothing from today, remember that everyone who enters your church is in crisis. No one gets up and decides, I'm going to come to church today when I haven't been to church in years if there's not something horrible going on in their lives. I know what you're thinking. You just moved. Well, you've never moved before if you don't think that's a crisis. How many of you know moving is a crisis? Pastors, raise your hand. You know it. It's hard, right? The people who come to visit you for the first time, they're going through something. They're looking for a place that has the answers to the problems in their lives. I'm unemployed. I'm drowning in credit card debt. My wife wants a divorce. My husband wants a divorce. My kids are making bad decisions. I feel lonely. I feel isolated. I tried to commit suicide yesterday and it didn't work. These are all things I've heard from people in churches that join my faith community. We need to get serious about hospitality because the world is hurting and God only put one answer that I can find in the Bible to the problems, and that is the church. He has no plan B. We are it. And we play at it like it's a game. It's about time we got serious about it because people need the church. If they got up enough gumption to come into our church, we owe it to them to go out of their way for them and really, really serve them and be there for them, for that, at least for that hour. It's important. God needs your church. There's a reason why my husband and I do what we do, and that's because we believe that the answer to the crisis in this nation lies within the local church. I love John. John, you know I love you. But the answer does not lie with our bishops or our district superintendents. The answers lie in the local church. Okay? So don't ever forget that. Don't ever forget how important every Sunday is. Don't ever forget how important every individual in your church is. And that is why at Broken Sheep our motto is helping churches embody that the one is greater than the 99. And I hope I did that for you in some small way today. All right. Questions. We have about half an hour for questions, 15 minutes, half an hour for questions. Anything I've covered, even anything that's not related to the content. I see. Go ahead. I'll get you next.
Using some people that we could find. We have a guest survey already.
Okay, wonderful.
And we were sort of thinking, we need to find some people who, again, don't have a lot of church experience, or at least haven't experienced our building. But after hearing you, I wonder if it makes more sense to partner with a church 2 counties over. And
talk to your DS. I bet he could.
Send us some of your people. We'll send you some of our people.
We're connectional. This should be easy for us, right?
But that would be better, in your opinion, than finding people who have less church experience.
When they go to fill out that survey and you ask what was the quality of the sermon, are they going to know if they've never heard a good sermon before? Or if they don't understand who Jesus is?
Right.
Or they don't know they should hear the name of Jesus? Okay? Does that make sense?
I don't know if that survey we've got is the same.
All right, there's a question back here.
What do you think is at the root of someone being not hospitable?
Why are some people more warm or hospitable than the others?
I mean, like, when you went to the churches and
yes.
you did not feel like you were reached and nobody connected with you.
Yes.
Have you ever thought
about why.
Why are they doing this to me? What do you think is at the root?
I don't think it's personal. I think they treat every guest that walks through their door like that, which is why their church is dying. Having said that, I think churches have a lot of different reasons for not being hospitable. I think it's a bad habit, right? I think in some cases churches don't feel like it's important to be hospitable. People are just supposed to go to church, and that's what they're supposed to do, and if they don't want to go to church here, fine, go to another church. Like they don't think it's important. It's not a value to them because they have been going to church for 30 years there, and they forget what it's like to be a stranger in a church. How many of you have ever gone to a church where you didn't know anybody and you didn't know? How many of you have ever gone to a Catholic church by yourself? It's terrifying, isn't it? It's terrifying. My grandmother was Catholic. She would take me to the Catholic church, and I loved her, but all those like icons and the holy water and the smoke and the candles really freaked me out. And after church, we went over to the priest's house, and he gave me peanuts. And I don't like peanuts, but I ate them because I thought if I didn't eat the peanuts, I'd go to hell. True story.
I think people, you're talking about somebody that's gone to that church for 30 years, I think subconsciously they're protective.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if I
want new people here.
Too much because all of a sudden I may lose my power. I may not be the big cheese anymore. And I think there's some of that.
And I will say some of it is churches don't think they have anything to offer a first-time guest. Especially small churches. Actually, my husband and I looked for small churches first. We looked at small churches first. Does that surprise anyone here? We looked at the small churches first because we felt like we could really make an impact in an impact in a small church and a contribution to a small church. And we really wanted a place where we could be in ministry and come alongside a pastor and change the future and the outcome of a small church. And the vibe we got from a lot of these small churches is that they didn't feel good about their churches. So they didn't feel like anyone else would come in and feel good about their church and want to be there. Yes. Yes, sir.
The church I'm at right now, we do I've only been there since June, so I know I don't want to make changes too quick, that's for sure. But we do a praise and prayer concern time.
And how long does that last?
Too long. The praise, to me, I watched one day, we had some visitors come, and the praise, they're all talking, one of them was talking about, I got a new truck, and stuff like that. That excludes visitors. They don't feel like
they don't know who your Aunt Mabel with the, is.
Joe, your Aunt Sally, if you remember, she passed away 6 months ago, and get all this family history stuff. And I know I need to change that. I don't know how to change that real quick, but without.
Couple choices that you have that I advise churches, okay? And I know for a lot of people getting rid of it isn't an option. Some pastors I know have gone to a book that you put your joys and concerns in the book before you go into the sanctuary, and then you can monitor it. You could still get them out there, but you can monitor the time. Some churches I know, the pastor has become an artist in the cutoff. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you have to cut people off.
Dude, I know.
When they stop for breath, say thank you for sharing that. We all rejoice with you. Does anyone else have a concern? And it sounds rude, and we don't want to be rude, and we don't want to cut off, because in seminary we're taught to be caring and loving and listeners. But not everybody sitting in our pews are trained to be caring, loving, and listeners. They don't. I mean, unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever, that's just not what people are made of. And so becoming the master of the cutoff is also a really, really good option.
Let the lay leaders do that right now.
Take over.
Probably take over, because it has gone on for 7 or 8 minutes, 9 minutes,
Yeah.
You got one that she'll get up and give her life history every Sunday.
You can cut them off with a song too. Amazing.
There you go.
Then you change the praises to God's song.
Kind of like in the Oscars, they'll play you off.
But, I mean, there are creative ways. You just really have to get creative. Sometimes people can have backdoor conversations with those people who tend to be consistent in that someone who has a really, really strong, you're new. You don't want to be the one to have that conversation with that with that person who does that. But someone who it can get by word, second, third hand to that person that we love you and we want you to share your life with us, but you need to keep it to 30 seconds kind of thing. And those backdoor conversations might be an appropriate method for lovingly help people understand what the expectations are during that joys and concerns time.
I'm trying to get somebody in prayer concerns. I don't need everybody's medical history.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get information that I prefer the congregation not be getting. In other words, stuff that people would many times.
Right. One of the most amazing churches I ever served are, and this is kind of a backdoor, start putting your church services on the internet, and then we can't talk about confidential stuff because it's going to be on the internet. So we had no joys and concerns at that church because we were televised, and we can't just stand up and say whatever we want when the stuff is going on public television. So, if you start putting them online, your services online, it's a great time to reintroduce your church to different kinds of habits around joys and concerns. The pastor needs to have those ahead of time. He or she needs to have those ahead of time so I can make sure that everything I'm sharing is indeed public and not confidential. And that's another concern with those open things. You need to be so careful. Very, very careful. Yes.
What's your thoughts on you mentioned the meet and greet time earlier.
Yeah.
I know I was reading some Tom Raynor blog, and he's like,
he hates it.
8 out of 10 people.
Raynard hates it.
Yeah. So I just
Raynard would rather have a tooth canal than go through meet and greet time.
What's your research perspective?
If your church is good at greeting time, it's fine. If your church isn't good at greeting time, you need to get rid of it.
And how would you qualify good?
That they greet first-time visitors before each other first. Okay. If you have a meet and greet time, you need to time that sucker. There needs to be a timer. And then when it's over, the church continues. I don't care if everybody in that church is up and greeting. I go back to church when that timer is up. So it's just a way to help raise self-awareness in your congregation when you have that ticker timer in the background. To say, hey, you've got 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes tops to greet people. Because let's face it, first-time visitors want to be said hello to, but not for longer than 2 minutes. Okay, there's a limit. So I do recommend for churches that really struggle with the greeting time to put a timer up there. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
Let's time back to the first part of your presentation. Part about, you were saying create that excitement for the event.
Yes.
That kind of thing. But, my concern is that does it raise the expectation that Sundays are going to be like that? Especially,
high energy?
Yeah, high energy, especially for a smaller church, where...
And they can be.
Where you're more used to a traditional kind of service.
Just because it's traditional doesn't mean it can't be high energy.
Okay.
Your traditional service should still have a good energy. Do you know what I mean by energy? A feel to it, a liveliness to it. Just because it's contemplative doesn't mean it doesn't have life.
Well, I'll give you an example. If say Saturday you do a rock band kind of concert.
Right.
And Sunday, we're singing hymns.
Yeah,
there's a big drop.
There is a difference. At the church I did this, we had 2 venues we worshiped in. One was a traditional worship venue and one was a contemporary worship venue. And there is a little bit of a dissidence in that, but maybe that a rock concert isn't contextually appropriate for your church, and that's fine. You don't have to do that. But what I'm talking about with that is there should be an energy. before people go into the sanctuary, it should not feel like someone beat them and drug them to church. How many of you know what I'm talking about? It's like the Battalion Death March going into the sanctuary. Or, do you know what I mean? Your church, no matter what kind of worship you do, there should be a feeling that the people are truly, genuinely happy and excited to be there, that they're there and the Holy Spirit is there, and when they go into that sanctuary, it's going to be unleashed and they're going to experience God, and that's exciting. Whether it be in a traditional, contemporary, blended venue, you want, well, I would call it the buzz, okay? The churches, when I get to the height, there's a buzz. You can almost literally feel it in the air. It's a frenetic energy that everyone there is just so happy and excited to be at church on Sunday. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I apologize. I can't describe it to you. But there's like a literal buzz in the air. It's palpable that the people are happy to be there and they expect the Holy Spirit to be there when they show up. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. Just a energy in the air. That's what you want. The buzz. That's how you know you're doing some stuff right. There's a buzz in the air. Yes?
This is like more of a general question, just overall for all churches.
Yes.
I know in the presentation for both sections,
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about teaching your
Laity.
your
People.
your people how to be hospitable and how to do these things.
Right.
How have you found it successful for churches to teach their people, like a Sunday school class or in church?
Yeah, there's 100 ways you can do that. You know, it can be a Sunday school church. It can be like a half-hour training where they're practicing the greeting time. When I did this hospitality training with John in his church, I actually stopped and made people practice introducing themselves in the middle of church. Okay, so just this is how you do it. You watch me do it. I watch you do it. You do it independently of me on Sunday, you know, that kind of thing. But they just need practice and a little supervision once in a while, you know. But it doesn't have to be brain surgery. It doesn't have to be anything formal. It doesn't have to be anything long. People don't like that. But yeah. So, but it can be quick and easy. I'm actually going to train a church, and the training is going to happen during church service on Sunday. I'm preaching, and they don't know it, but it's hospitality training. Okay, so, yes?
So, do you have any suggestions on how to take individuals who are volunteer leaders and help them to become servant leaders? We have many individuals that will volunteer for everything, but they are so negative about every single thing that comes up on how to actually participate.
Whiner babies?
They're not using their talent. It's not their gift.
So why are they volunteering? Have you gotten there, Greg? Like, I mean, I'm sure you're the only church that has this problem, but
I think part of it is what he mentioned, like they're
not
kind of protective because they've always went to that church and they're kind of protective of, but they're not.
And they've always done it.
And they're the one.
Well, there's the problem.
For 20 years. Yeah.
Maybe it's time to usher these people in some new ministry opportunities.
That's hard.
It's not mean. It's not mean. I know everybody's like, oh, I'd rather have a root canal than tell so-and-so this. Okay? This is a pat answer. That person needs to get a heart for the lost. If they have grandchildren, you need to talk about when your grandchildren, if you want your grandchildren's generation here, this is the expectation for volunteers. If you actually look at these job descriptions, some of the job descriptions say you're expected to be nice to people. You're expected to smile. So that's part of the problem. That's part of the advantages of these job descriptions. If they're not nice and they don't smile, they can't do the job. You don't fulfill the job description. See, then the job description is not the enemy and not the pastor. So I think some job descriptions might help you outline some expectations about what kind of behavior you expect when people volunteer for those positions, and then if they don't demonstrate that, it gives you a tool for moving them into a different sphere of ministry. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay. Because job descriptions aren't just for outreach events. Every role in your church should have a job description for that reason. The person knows exactly what's being expected of them. Yes?
Yeah, one of the things that we found helpful in our church is do a spiritual gift assessment.
Yeah.
And then kind of channel the people into the area where you feel that they're gifted in.
Yeah, yeah.
That can take them out of some spots where they've just been occupying.
And this is not to be rude, but I have sat volunteers down and be like, are you happy doing this? Because sometimes they're not happy. And it shows that they're not happy. And you'd be like, I really want you to be happy here.
Yeah.
Some people are happy when they are bullying.
Yes, and that's just never okay. Can we all agree with that? Right. That needs pastoral intervention, and it's the yucky stuff of ministry, and I know we don't like to deal with it, but it needs to be dealt with the same way we want to see it dealt with in school, swiftly and quickly. Yep. Okay. Yes.
This is related to follow-up.
Yes.
But it's not just about calling up people, or sending text messages. I think my church is not atypical for most Methodist churches now, where you have a good size number of very young people, good size of people who are retirees, but almost nothing in between. And I think there was an example you gave just now where one of the events was so successful in this church. They went from 0 to maybe, 100, 150 youth almost overnight. How did they move? How did they transition that way? It's like, oh, we'll do this event, we're done, and all these young people are coming in, but there's nobody to shepherd them, to take care of them. What did they do to prepare for that unexpected influx?
With this particular congregation, they were just so excited to have those youth there. They had been working tirelessly to try. They had hired a part-time youth person. They had done some things ahead of time, that we knew that's what we're going after. Remember, identify who you're going after. So I had identified youth. And this school, by the way, was right by the high school. They had just built a brand new high school, and this church was right by the new high school. So they had clearly identified what families they were going after. So they were staffed for that. And that was prayed over before we ever entered into that kind of outreach event. We knew that's what we were doing. They had a direction before we ever started. So again, be singular in your directions. You know what I mean? Be singular in the momentum or the direction that your church is going. And not all the time, but sometimes it does come together. It's beautiful when it does. It doesn't always. Life doesn't come with guarantees. You can do everything I told you to do and still end up kind of feeling empty-handed, but it's about faithfulness, right? So,
I think one thing that we have to remember, even if we try something and it doesn't work, that doesn't necessarily mean we failed.
No, just don't do that again.
Try something else.
Yeah, just don't do that again. Or don't do that in the same way again. We can cross that one off. That one doesn't work. On to our next idea. It's fine. It's not a big deal. You got it. Pastors were so tender. Do you know what I mean? We're so tender. We really have to just learn that even Jesus had people who didn't listen to him. He had 12 disciples and one of them betrayed him. This is the Son of God, okay? If that's Jesus' record, I'm okay if everything I do isn't successful, if every person I try and reach doesn't walk through the doors. Jesus has the parable of the sower and the seed, right? He sowed the same seed. Some fell on rocky ground and some fell on fertile soil. And so Jesus talks about this in Scripture. You're going to have to expect that some of your seeds are going to fall on rocky ground.
I think the hardest ones to take is when you cast a demon out of somebody and then they ask you to leave town.
Well, that would be hard, yeah. That would be hard, yeah. I mean, I've done it, but then, exactly, yeah. But, it's one of those things that, in my house, and this comes from 17 years of ministry, we have a little saying, and that's no good deed goes unpunished. And that's just kind of the nature of ministry. No good deed goes unpunished. You're going to throw this great outreach event and you're going to be so jazzed and so excited and things are going to go so well, and someone's going to come in and they're going to rain on your parade. They're going to complain. They're going to say that was the wrong thing to do. It's just the nature of ministry. And I know this sounds like really flippant and like I don't care, but I've been there and I know how disheartening that can be, right? You have to surround yourself with laity from the church who support you and are going to encourage you. You have to put your staff, parish, and your leadership team and position them so they need to understand what you're doing. Okay? If they don't understand what you're doing, you're going to struggle. You're just going to struggle. And you need to find people on those in your church who get it. Remember I talked about the whole church health thing and, the team thing and the biblical thing? All those things are key when we appoint and recruit leadership for key positions in our church. It's hard. I get it. Nothing I gave you today, in each step, everything I gave you today is easy peasy. But when you put it all together in the context of ministry, it's just hard. And ministry is hard. If you got into ministry because you thought it was easy and you were just going to sit back and collect a paycheck, you were wrong. You really need to talk to Dr. Hatton and he will help transition you to another place in life. But I don't think any of us got into it thinking it was easy, but there are going to be hard days because Satan doesn't want to see your church succeed. And if you don't think Satan isn't going to try and get into these outreach events, if Satan's not going to try and get into your people and you're trying to make them more hospitable and make them angry, you're sorely mistaken. Satan is going to meddle like no one's business. He's been doing it for centuries. He's not going to give up just because your church has given it a try. So it's a spiritual battle, and I believe that in all my heart and soul that it's a spiritual battle. So don't forget you're engaged in a spiritual battle. Okay? And it's hard when you're in the midst of it, isn't it? Devil don't get off your back sometime, does he? And that
said something. He said, no good deed
goes unpunished.
Well, God just gave me no good deed go unspoken. There's a time of our worship service where we have testimony time. And it's only one little lady that stands up and gives her testimony every Sunday. And we're waiting for others, and it's like, oh boy, looking around, it's who's going to go next, But I believe I'm going to come forward with this no good deed goes unspoken. We have those who give us testimonies during the week, and I'm going to ask them, do you mind sharing that?
Yes.
During testimony time.
And that's the thing, like after these events, make sure you celebrate. If you have an awesome outreach event, make sure you say, we had this many people at this event. We gave out so many bags of school supplies. We gave out so many hot dogs. Celebrate it. Do make sure you celebrate your successes because it will rally your church, okay? And you want your church excited, okay? So make sure you even if they're little victories, celebrate them. Okay? That's part of your follow-up. All right. I am reading the room. And I think, Dr. Hatton, did you have anything else to share with your flock before I closed out? All right.
Well, no, I just want to invite you to thank Dr. Seiberling for her time.